was the mini lesson for 4.5. So hopefully by now we have our rules down for how to add and subtract positive and negative numbers. This is going to be a little more difficult because now we're adding rational numbers, which means we're including negative and positive fraction and decimals. So when we look at this, it says, why might it be difficult to use a number line or counters to solve this? I think that's kind of obvious, that it's hard on a number line to move in fourths and in thirds, and these aren't even in the same. In colored counters, we'd be cutting up little pieces of a counter. So we need to be able to come up with some rules that we're going to follow. So what's the rule for adding signed numbers with different signs? So I see I have a positive, I have a negative. I know that when the signs are different, I'm subtracting the absolute values. And then what will be the sign of the sum for this problem? So I know that I always take the sign of the larger absolute value. Since the absolute value of this is larger than the absolute value of this, and the 23 3/4 is a negative, I know that my answer is going to be negative because the absolute value of negative 23 3/4 is greater than the absolute value of 12 1/3. So now we're going to calculate the sum. So I know I need to subtract their absolute values, and I know my answer is going to be negative. So here's what I always do. Give myself a box. I know my answer is negative, so let's just take care of that right away. Now I'm subtracting their absolute values. So I have to write the larger absolute value first. So that would be the absolute value of this is larger. So 23 3/4, and I'm subtracting 12 1/3. Now we have to make common denominators for subtraction. So I'm going to go to 12s. So 4 times 3 is 12. 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times 4 is 12. 1 times 4 is 4. 9 minus 4 is 5/12. And when I subtract these whole pieces, I get 11 5/12. I have to remember to put it over here in the box, otherwise I may get the sign wrong. Okay, let's try a couple others. Here, I see I have a negative and a positive, so different signs. So I'm finding the difference. I know I'm going to be subtracting their absolute values. So I put the larger absolute value first, and I'm subtracting the smaller absolute value. Now I'm going to give myself a box for my answer, and I'm taking the sign of the larger absolute value. Since this has a larger absolute value and it's positive, my answer is going to be positive, so I'm going to leave the box blank. So now I just need to subtract these absolute values. Common denominators, 15 times 3 times 3 times 5 times 5. Okay, this one I need to really think about my math. If I have 5, I cannot take 9 away. So I need to regroup. I'm going to make this 6 a 5. So I took 1 whole off. I'm going to rewrite 1 whole using 15ths. So I know 15 15ths is 1 whole, and I add 5 there. So now I have 20 15ths. If I have 20, I can take 9 away. I get 11 15ths, and 5 minus 5, I would have no wholes left. So my answer, I'm going to put it back in the box, is 11 15ths. This one, I have a negative plus a negative. I know when my signs are the same, I add their absolute values. So I know I'm adding 3 2/3 plus 4 2/3. And when I add, I know that my sign stays the same for the solution. So since both are negative, my answer is negative. Here I already have a common denominator. So 2 plus 2 is 4/3. 3 plus 4 is 7. This is improper. 3 goes into 4 1 full time. There would be 1 left over. So altogether I have 8 1/3, and it's negative. Now the same with decimals. I have a negative and a positive. When the signs are different, I'm finding the difference. So I'm subtracting their absolute values. I need the larger one first. And I know I have to line up decimals. For my solution, I take the sign of the larger absolute value. Since this absolute value is greater and it's positive, my answer will be positive. So now I just subtract. 6 becomes a 5. 10 minus 4 is 6. 5 minus 3. 10 minus 7. Put it in my box so I make sure I get the correct sign. And there's my solution. Let's jump ahead and look at subtraction. We figured out that we can change any subtraction problem to an addition problem by adding the opposite. So if I change this to add the opposite, I've now created an equivalent addition problem. So now I'm asking myself the same two questions. When the signs are different, do I add or subtract? When they're different, I find the difference. I subtract. Larger absolute value goes first. Then I'm also asking myself, will my solution be negative or positive? Since the absolute value of this is larger than the absolute value of this, my solution will be negative. So now I just need to do my math and subtract. I need a common denominator, so I'm going to use 8. So I have 6/8, and this one stays 7/8. If I have 6, I can't take 7 away, so I'm regrouping. I'm taking a whole off of here, so I'm rewriting a whole in eighths. 8/8 is the same thing as that 1 that I took away, but I had 6/8 already. So altogether, I have 14/8. Now I can subtract 7 to get 7/8, and 6 minus 4 is 2. Write it in the box so that I get the right sign. Here, add opposite. So I have a negative plus a negative. I know when the signs are the same, I find the sum means addition of their absolute values. So I have 11.5 plus 12 1/5. I know when the signs are the same, my answer will be that same sign. So I'm going to change this to tenths, times 5, times 5, times 2, times 2. So 5 plus 2 is 7/10. 11 plus 12 is 23. Put it in here. So in every single problem, once I make an addition problem, so once I have an addition problem, I ask myself two questions. One, I'm asking, will the solution be negative or positive? The second thing I'm asking myself is, do I add or subtract the absolute values? Okay, here's a quick way to remember. When the signs are the same, I'm finding the sum, which means addition. When the signs are different, I'm finding the difference, which is subtraction. So see, D, difference, S, S. So that will help me. And then should they be negative or positive? We know that when, so this here goes with number 2. Should it be negative or positive? When the signs are the same, I just keep the sign. So 2 negatives, my answer is negative. 2 positives, my answer is positive. If the values are different signs, the solution is the larger absolute value. Okay, continue to work through the lesson.